Okay. Okay, so just a little bit of housekeeping here. I did start recording it. What I'm going to do here is give you a real quick overview, just 2 or 3 slides. There's a couple of people here who are not familiar with Frevo necessarily. So we'll do a real fast overview and then jump into a demo and examples just to show you how you can use Frevo to perform various aspects of purchase order automation. We will have some time at the end for questions. Just so you know, in your GoToMeeting panel, you probably won't see all of these tabs in here, but there should be a questions tab, and all you got to do is type your question in there. My colleague Courtney is here with me, and she will either answer your question in the chat window itself or hold it for the end of the webinar when we hopefully will have some time for questions as well. Okay. So with that, real quick, what do we do? Frevo is point-and-click software that you can use to design any form and automate any approval workflow in literally a matter of days. So by design any form, we have a sophisticated form designer that you can use to just drag and drop controls onto your form, rearrange them, does a lot of automatic validation. You can create dynamic forms as well. You can have collapsible sections, business rules, show hide sections on demand, etc. And then finally, you can also, typically in most businesses, these forms are they don't live in isolation, but they're typically routed to various people for approval. Purchase order is a great example. Often in a purchase order, I might fill out the form, then it gets routed to my specific manager for approval. Maybe it gets routed to a VP or the CFO, depending on conditions, such as maybe the amount is greater than $10,000, it needs further approval. Maybe it gets routed to the finance department, perhaps even to an external client outside the company for signature. So that's the kind of stuff that you can very easily do with Frevo today. A lot of customers come to Frevo from doing these things in email. So they might fill out an Excel spreadsheet or perhaps a PDF, and in some cases even paper, where they literally fill out a paper form and walk it around the building to get the necessary approvals. So it's very easy to automate these routine day-to-day approval workflows with Frevo. We have a lot of customers, hundreds of customers are already using Frevo for a variety of approval workflows. Many names in here that I'm sure you recognize, but we also have a lot of smaller companies as customers. And so really have everybody from all kinds of sizes and all kinds of verticals that are using Frevo, and really to solve a very extensive set of business problems. What are some of those business problems? Well, we already just talked about purchase orders, but things like expense reports, travel reimbursement claims. Employee onboarding is a really common example of a business problem that's solved with Frevo. Absence records, especially in K-12 schools, permission forms, sales orders, transportation. So we have several customers using this for, bus routes for the upcoming school year. And then another thing that a lot of customers really do use Frevo for is its sophisticated integration capabilities, and particularly when it comes to databases or SQL integration. So I added a quick example of that. I'm going to show you an example of that really quickly as well. But it's an area where Frevo is particularly strong, and we have a lot of customers that use Frevo along with our database connector for this kind of integration. And then finally, why do they use Frevo? Well, the most important reason is the first one there, business requirements. So Frevo is a lot more than building a contact form or a wedding invitation form or something of that sort. It's really intended for complex business processes that you run within your organization. People need digital signatures, security, the ability to integrate with Active Directory or SAML for authentication purposes. We already talked about SQL integration. A lot of these forms are extremely dynamic, so we have a very powerful visual, easy to use rule builder. SharePoint integration, the ability to talk to a variety of document management systems, the ability to generate PDFs, including an automatic PDF generation, as well as being able to map to a government PDF, like a W-4 or an I-9 for employee onboarding. The ability to use these things anytime, anywhere, from literally any device. It automatically works on all kinds of mobile devices, phones, iPads, etc., etc. So at the end of the day, customers choose Frevo because it's able to meet real-world business requirements. At the same time, it's very easy and fast to build these applications with Frevo. It's not practical in most situations to build native apps or to do custom coding. It's very expensive. It takes a lot of time. And that's if you can even find the necessary resources. The people who have these skills are really hard to find. And that's where a product like Frevo makes things a lot easier, because a lot of people with not necessarily programmers by training, are able to use Frevo to deliver these automated business processes and forms. And then finally, you also have very rapid ROI as a result of some of the things that I've already mentioned earlier. One of our most recent PO workflow examples for our customers took about 45 person-hours, so literally just over a week. And within that time frame, you were able to deliver to that customer a fully functional PO workflow, something that they were literally using sneakerware, paper form, printing it out, filling it out in an Excel spreadsheet, printing it out, and literally walking it around the building. So the ROI on that is extremely, extremely high. And they were able to do it without requiring needing to hire or get any expensive IT resources. So that's a quick introduction to Frevo. So let's jump into some demo, into a demo and some examples. So I wanted to show you a few things that I know have come up a lot with customers and prospects recently. Now, one of the first things here is single sign-on. So this is a very, increasingly it's become a really common requirement, a feature, things that people really like. And that's really the ability to integrate with your existing identity management system. So SAML is one way to do it. Frevo also does support directly integrating with your Active Directory or other LDAP system as well. Within SAML, you can use a variety of SAML providers. Google Apps is one. A lot of customers use Azure Active Directory, Okta, and several other SSO providers as well. And how do you do that? Well, it's really easy with Frevo. You just go to a specific URL for your particular account. And since Frevo knows that this account is configured, oh, I must have been already logged in. Darn it. Hang on, let me log out and try that again. Do you know why I'm automatically logged in? Probably. Well, in just a second. I bet you I got to log out of Google also. Thought I was logged out. Okay. I think now that I'm actually signed out of Google, this thing will let me, will ping me, or will send me automatically to the login page. So now I'm going to the Frevo server, which is configured for SAML authentication with Google in this case, and then it's going to take me to the Google login page, and I simply click on whatever Google account I want. I log in as my Google. I log into Google, and using SAML, it automatically redirects me to Frevo, and I'm automatically logged in to Frevo as that particular user. Okay, so it's very easy to set up and use. We have extensive documentation on this, and it's already in use by a variety of customers, both Azure, Google Apps, Active Directory, and other LDAP systems as well. Okay, so just wanted to make sure I went through that and not make that same mistake again. Make sure I log out. All right. Yeah, just kill my browser too. Okay, so just a real quick look at how you can do these kinds of things with single sign-on. Now, one of the other things, before I'm kind of building up towards the purchase order, was one of the other things that I did want to also talk about is these visual designers and business rules. So one of the most common things that customers use Frevo for is its dynamic behavior. So they love the fact that they can create these very dynamic forms that can show and hide sections on demand, that can perform calculations automatically, initialize forms automatically without the need to necessarily know how to write a lot of code. So I'm going to show you a couple of examples of how you do that outside of the context of the overall PO workflow, because that one has a number of business rules. So let's take a quick look at that. and some of these things are rules that are applicable also to your purchase order. So here's an example of, I have a few forms in here. We'll just walk through a couple of those in here. So one of the most common ones is literally simply to set today's date. So every purchase order, and probably a variety of other applications in your organization, travel authorization, what have you, will want to automatically, will have a field where you have to enter today's date. So with Frevo, how do you do that? You simply have a date field that you've dragged and dropped. So you drag and drop a date field and stick it on there. This is one. It's called, it has a name. It's called today's date. And then you have a business rule. So let's take a look at the business rule in here, and it's absolutely trivial here. It's you got to check the initialization rule only. So this rule is automatically run at initialization. So it runs when the form loads, and that's the only time it'll run. And all you have to do is visually set it up so that, well, you know what, why don't I create this rule again? So let's do that again. Let's create a rule and say set today's date, whatever. Run the rule builder here. We're going to check this initialization rule only. If you didn't check this, you have the ability to enter conditions. So when do you want this rule to run? So you might want the rule to run if I answer yes to a particular question. We'll take a look at an example of that as we go along. So I'm going to check this initialization rule only, click next, and I'm going to say, let's set today's date. What are we going to do? Well, there's a variety of things you can do. You can hide it, make it required, make it optional, make it visible. You can set a default value. You can set help, hint, label, etc. You can disable it, enable it, but you can also set its value. So I'm going to set its value to, you can use here now a literal value like 12 or 13 or something like that, or you can use expressions and functions. So using a function here is very similar to Excel or Google Sheets or any spreadsheet that you have. So pretty familiar things. You start typing today. It'll give you a list of matching functions and it'll autocomplete as desired. So that's all there is to it. And I click finish over here. And what we've done here is created a business rule that sets the date to today. We can try this out by clicking this little magic wand here, and you'll see that today's date was automatically set. In this test mode here, when you're trying Frevo forms and workflows, you'll see down here a debug console as well, which gives you the ability to take a look at the rules and say what actually happened as this rule was being executed. Of course, this won't show up in production use when you deploy the form and you're running it in for real. Let me walk through a couple of other quick rules over here because they're really common and usually very applicable to purchase orders. So in a purchase order application here, it would be very common to have this kind of table. So you'll have a table with a description. What am I going to buy? What's the quantity? What's the unit price? Maybe the unit price can also be pulled in from a database if necessary. And then there's a subtotal where I'm going to calculate a line item total and then a grand total that calculates the overall total. No need to make users calculate that or type that in manually, of course. But even from a business rule perspective, you really don't have to write any code to do that. So let's take a look at how do you calculate a subtotal. Very simple. What are the conditions? When do you want to calculate a subtotal? Well, when I've got a quantity and a unit price, because the subtotal is the product of the two. So you got to make sure that I've got a quantity and a unit price. So when condition is when quantity and unit price are filled. We're going to set the subtotal to the product, quantity multiplied by unit price. Otherwise, we're going to set the subtotal to empty. And that's all there is to it. It's a really simple way to create this kind of super dynamic behavior. And notice that in this, you don't have to really worry about the fact that the subtotal and the quantity are part of a table, so that there might be multiple rows. Frevo's rule builder will automatically do that. And you can also take a look at the rule code, if you will, that's being generated behind the scenes. So you can see behind the scenes is generating a little loop that says I'm going to loop over all the rows in the table. And wherever I've got a quantity and a unit price, I'm going to set the value to their product. Otherwise, I'm going to set its value to null. And the grand total is similar, but actually even simpler. There is no condition at all. You just always want to calculate a grand total. And you're always going to set the grand total to the sum of all the subtotals. And that's it. There's no else. There's no false condition. Since there is no condition, there's no else part, if you will. So we always want to set the grand total to the sum of all the subtotals. And so it's really easy to create these kinds of business rules for dynamic behavior. Again, if we try this out, we'll see in here that you enter a description and a quantity and a price, and you'll see how it calculates the subtotal. And the grand total is also being automatically computed. So that's a quick look at some of the rules, some of the just a tiny subset of all the rules and dynamic behavior that's possible in Frevo. It's a really wide, extensive list of things that you can do. You can show and hide things, you can concatenate, you can automatically populate user information like first name, last name, email address, who's my manager. You can show and hide sections of the form depending on which step in the workflow you're in. So the variety of things that you can do. We'll see a couple more of these in the purchase order example. But I just wanted to give you a quick look at some of these visual rule examples outside the workflow context. And then the other thing, one of the other things I wanted to make sure we also take a quick peek at is also these dynamic forms. So this is another thing that is really, really powerful and really common use in Frevo. In this case, this form is connected to a SQL database on the back end, but you can connect it to your HR system, your ERP system, or whatever backend system you want, as long as there's some way to access the data within the system. And customers are using it to pre-fill forms for creating things like dynamic pick lists. So the values in the pick list come from a backend system. They can also be dynamic in the sense that one pick list can depend upon the other. You can view, create, or update records. In the case of SQL databases, you can even run stored procedures from a form. So let's take a super fast look at one of these forms. So you'll see in here that we've got a simple form here, a purchase order form. I'm going to select a customer. This list of customers comes from the database. So when I select a customer, the second list of pick list here populates with orders that come from the database for that customer. And then when I select a specific order, the line items are displayed down below. Select a different order and you get a different set of line items. Select a different customer and you get a different set of orders. And again, select the order and you get a different set of line items. So very easy to do. There is in fact no programming required whatsoever to do this. It's just visual. So it's really at the same time, it's very, very powerful and easy to do with Frevo. So just quickly wanted to give you a quick look at those aspects of Frevo as well. And now kind of tie all some of those things together into a purchase order approval workflow. So this is, as I mentioned earlier, it's maybe certainly one of the most common workflows, probably the most common workflow automated with Frevo. It's between purchase order and employee onboarding. Those are probably two most common workflows. This is an example, though. There could be any, we've seen everything, all kinds of PO workflows with all kinds of logic, routing, and business rules and conditions in there. So the example that we're looking at here is an employee who starts the form, starts the purchase order, fills out, hey, here's what I'm trying to buy, which then routes to his or her specific manager. It can't route to a role. If I'm the employee, it needs to route to my manager and not just to any manager. And then from there, I'm going to go conditionally route to the VP, and that's only if the value of the PO, the grand total essentially, is greater than $10,000. That's a business rule set up within my company. You can set it up for whatever you want. It might be 2,000 or it might be 100,000 in your case. And then finally, it goes off to the finance department for payment. So this is, we're going to take a look at this workflow and try and essentially build it in Frevo. So here's a little screenshot of the actual flow itself. What we're going to do here is install an existing purchase order template that you can do yourself as well from a cloud account. And then we're going to configure it so that it routes to a specific manager. We're going to route to a specific role. We're going to add that conditional routing, perhaps anonymous routing. There's a dynamic form in there as well with some of those business rules that we already talked about here. Take a look at notifications, and then the system and the workflow also supports escalations as well as rejections. So what I'm going to do here now is I'm going to actually log into a test system. This is our upcoming version of Frevo. It's set to be released to cloud in just 3 or 4 weeks. This is version 8 coming soon, and there's going to be another webinar on this that just literally introduces features in version 8. But I tried it out this morning, looked like it was working pretty well, so figured let's give it a shot. So I'm logged into the version 8 a server running the current version of Frevo. And you'll see here there are a number of templates that are available to you. The first one is purchase order, and all you do to install a purchase order template is click this install button, and it should take you and install the purchase order. We'll just dismiss there. There's a little help tour that guides you through what to do in here as well, but we're going to ignore that for the time being. So the PO template actually installs 3 different workflows that are all pretty similar. The first one goes from employee to manager finance, employee manager VP finance, and employee manager VP. We'll for the time being, let's work with the third one because I think it demonstrates all the capabilities that we want to show in here. So the first thing we're going to do is try it out. So let's click test over here and give this workflow a shot and take a look at all the things that are going on in here. So the first thing here is that this sample template, when it's initially installed, doesn't actually have the routing built in. And that's so it's easy for you to try it out. Otherwise, imagine if it was actually routing to 3 different people. Just to try the template, you'd have to fill it in, log out, log in as a second person, perform your task, click submit. When it routes to the third person, you know to log out and log in again, etc. So we made it a little easier by skipping the routing for the time being. But there's still a lot of dynamic behavior going on in here. So you can see a PO number is generated automatically. The date field was automatically set. We saw earlier in the business rule to create that. The billing and shipping information are also dynamically updated. So this is the name of the logged in person, James Kirk. As you can see, the first name and the last name are as well as the email address are automatically set up from the logged in person's information. You'll see in here we've got this order information table. We've got that grand total. We've got that subtotal. We've got what's called an upload control here. So if necessary, you can also attach detailed documents. So maybe I've got some sort of specs or some sort of documents that are relevant to whatever items I'm trying to purchase, and I can apply that as well. And then we've got a signature field in here. So let's fill that in. You can see that some of the fields in the first row here are yellow, a different color. These are required, so a PO must have at least 1 line item. Instead of yellow, you can certainly change the color, the appearance of a required control using the styles feature of Frevo to however you like, whatever makes sense in your context. So let's say we're ordering some red widgets. Let's say there are 13 of them, and it's $100 each, 101. You'll see again the subtotal and the grand total are being computed. You'll also see in here that this label for the section as a whole also shows that grand total, and that's because if the section is collapsed, you can see at a glance what's in there. You can certainly customize the label of this section to have whatever you want in there and automatically be populated dynamically. So let's add a second thing, and let's then make sure this time that the total is greater than $10,000. So now that we've created a PO where the grand total is greater than $10,000, you see that a little box pops up saying that the grand total is more than $10,000, so we're going to automatically route to the VP for additional approval. And that's just informational for the person filling out the form, so I can see the form and say, oh, that makes sense. You can't submit this form yet because the signature is required. If you click the Send to Manager button, it'll say there are errors in the form, make corrections. I'm going to click the signature button here and I'm going to sign. And now you'll see that I think everything has been filled in over here. And I'm going to click on the Send to Manager button. Now, remember what I said earlier, when I click that button over here, we're not actually routing in this case. We're pretending to route to the manager. You'll see that it's gone from employee to manager. And now the form has changed so that order information and employee information are automatically collapsed, but I can still, as the manager, take a quick look and say, okay, this is $11,000. What are the order? Red and blue widgets. I can't change any of this data in here, but I can view it. And say looks good. I can put in some optional comments in here. I can sign it. Now this is a different type of signature in that it's not, it's going to sign that section as a whole. This is a digital signature that locks the content of the section. So in this case, I click the sign button and up comes the box again. I'm going to sign and I'm going to approve and send it to the VP. Once again, we're pretending to route to the VP. We're going to add this routing in just a second here. And again, it's very similar. The form has changed. The employee or employee information, order information, manager approval are all collapsed, but I can always expand and look at them, but I can't change anything. I'm going to approve this, and this is yet another way to sign it. It's very similar to the manager, except that the signature is placed automatically. The little box that makes you that lets you sign using your finger on a touch screen or your mouse doesn't show up. In this case, just puts your first name, last name, and the date automatically. In both cases, it's a full-fledged PKI digital signature in that the data cannot be modified, otherwise the signature will become invalid, and this section will display a red banner down below saying that this data has been tampered. I don't think you need to be careful with this. So I'm going to click approve and finish the PO, and you'll see that it says a purchase order was complete, and we've sent a copy by email to the email address of the original recipient for your records. We should have received that. Always takes longer when I'm on a webinar. Here it is, and you can see there's the PO, the PDF, automatically generated PDF for the purchase order. Okay, so in this case, what we've done now is we've taken a quick look at the template without any actual routing. So now let's route to the actual, let's add that routing. So I'm going to click edit on this workflow here. Now you'll see some of you who are familiar with Frevo's version 7 and earlier product, you'll see that the UI has changed a little bit. We've got the flow designer now displays the flow in a more visually intuitive manner with some colors and so on and so forth. Particularly, you can see the conditional steps as well displayed in here. Okay, so what do we want to do here? This step is handled by the employee. There's really no routing required here. But from here, we want to send this to the manager. So how do you send a route to a manager? Well, there are a number of settings in here. There are general settings, task assignment. So who are you assigning this step to? And a variety of other steps in there. So we're interested in the assignment. So let's click on the little assignment, little settings icon there. And you'll see that a wizard comes up. So this is very different in this version of Frevo from prior versions where you configured this all the way in the properties panel on the left side here. So this is a new wizard that really guides you through the process. The wizard has a number of tabs in here that allow you essentially to configure everything that we used to have earlier. Now, what do we want to do here? We want to assign this to a specific user. So what I could do in here is I could type a user ID. You'll see that it auto-completes, and I could pick a specific user. But that's not what we really want in this case, because what we really want is to route it to that employee's manager. And that manager will change depending on who the employee is. So instead of assigning to a specific user, we need to assign it to that manager. So that takes a couple of steps here intentionally. So I get to show you some stuff. So I'm going to edit this form first. I'm going to add a field to the form. So drag the text field in here, and I'm going to call it my manager, let's say. We don't want to be typing in here, so I'm going to disable this. And what I'm going to do here now is set the manager in here dynamically using one of those visual business rules. So we're going to go to the rules tab. You can see there are a number of rules in here already, including some where we've kind of taken a look at calculating subtotals and totals. We're going to create a new rule here, and we'll call it set my manager or something like that. We're going to run the rule builder here. This is an initialization rule because we want it to run when the form initializes. I'm going to click next. I'm going to say, which one do you want to set? I want to set my manager to, and you can set it to this function user manager ID. which now sets the manager, this my manager field, to the ID of my manager. Finish. The rule's all set. I can try it out. I'm going to click this little this wand icon in here. Should pop up the button. Let's make sure that works. You can see that my manager got set to manager. So I guess my manager is a person with the login ID manager, a generic manager login in here. Looks good to me. Now that we've done that, is there anything else in here that I wanted to? I think not. I think we've covered everything in here. One quick look thing in here is also many of these things. Remember how we were on the manager step, the prior employee steps, etc., were collapsed, and the manager approval step became visible and expanded. Again, that's set over here. Using the business rule, you can select a step manager, and you can see how the business rule wizard is also being used to configure the look and the appearance of the form depending on which flow step you're on. So I'm not going to mess with this since this rule is already working. Click Save here. We've now created a field in the form that will automatically be initialized with the ID of my manager. So now let's go to this manager step here, click on Assignment. And this time, instead of assigning to a specific user, I'm going to assign it to a template. So you'll see again, it gives you a pop-up that says, oh, it's my manager. And that's all you have to do here. So now what's going to happen is that this step is going to be assigned to a specific user. Which user? That the user will be determined dynamically at runtime depending on who runs the form. So in this case, when I run the form, since my manager has the user ID manager, it'll get routed to that manager. So you can see in this assignment panel, you can assign to a user a role and an email. So you could assign to users roles. You can have all three assignments, and assignment will be made at runtime in that priority order. So if a template is set up for a user and that resolves to null, then it'll drop down to the role. But if you find a specific user that you're going to route to, it'll always route to that user. You can also set the subject and the message of any notification email right here. So whenever the flow is put on someone's task list, the system can send a notification email. And there are a number of templates available in here as well, to built-in templates. We're not going to get into that right now. Click Submit, and now you'll see in here in the Properties panel, it shows that the task will be assigned to my manager. What about the VP? Well, in the VP case, we want to assign it to a role. So in this case, in this example, in our company here, we have a role called VP, and anybody with that role can approve this PO if it gets routed to them. So again, that's really simple. How do you go here? We don't want to assign it to a user. We want to assign it to a specific role. So let's start typing VP, and we see there is a role called VP in there. You see how automatically the email got grayed out, because now there's no dynamic behavior here. We know that the step here is going to be routed to the VP role. The rest of this is really similar. I'm going to click Submit in here. But then the other thing that you might remember is that we were only routing to the VP role if the grand total is greater than or equal to $10,000. So that's where the condition comes in. Click on the condition over here, and you can see that the precondition tab in the flow step properties in this panel is selected. And the condition is, there's a description for the condition, which you can provide. And then you can actually put in the actual precondition. Creating the precondition uses the same visual rule builder. It's just the condition. There are no actions to take. So all you do is say, well, when do I want this precondition, this to be true when the grand total is either greater than or equal to $10,000, as we saw, and that's it. We've determined as soon as we set that precondition, this yellow diamond will appear visually indicating that this is this step has a condition. So only if the condition is true, and the condition is the grand total greater than 10,000, it will route to the role VP. And that's it. So that's all it takes to set up the routing to route to a specific manager or route to a VP. Now the properties panels here have a lot of fields. We don't have time today to go through all of these, but we're going to have a webinar in 3 weeks that introduces, that's specifically about introducing version 8. And this is the most important, the biggest thing in this version. So hopefully you'll be able to attend that webinar as well. We'll go through this in much more detail. So let's save this and let's quickly run through the, I'm going to quickly click deploy here so we don't see those little yellow banners. So I'm going to click test here now, and once again that purchase order comes up. You'll see now that the same employee information fields are filled in, except the manager field is also filled in now. I'm going to type red widgets 11. Just got to make sure we get over $10,000. So we're over $10,000, so we'll route to the VP. I'm going to sign this thing in here. And now when I click send to manager, what it should do is actually route to that manager. So now instead of simply displaying the next step, it's actually sent it on to the actual manager for approval. So let's log in as the manager. So once again, we should have received an email saying manager approval needed. So that's the notification email that was set up here. So I'm going to click on this link here. Oops. So I'm going to log in as manager. Hopefully that password is right. Yes. And you'll see here, this thing was a little too wide. Okay. So as I've logged in as the manager, you're going to see your task list in here. Now, some of you may be familiar with Frevo's Spaces feature. So Frevo does include these things called spaces, which are essentially a portal that you can create. You can create as many portals as you want within your Frevo account. And they just provide a way to display your forms, your flows, your task list, and other important items and links in an organized manner. Spaces also do have a couple of other advantages. They support access control. So if you don't have access to a particular form, then it won't even display in the menu of the space. And they also render automatically on mobile devices. So let's take a look at this. Here's my, oh yeah, I shouldn't have resized it, but okay. So I'm logged in here as the manager. I'm on the manager step. I click the little red button to perform it. It's very similar, the employee information, order information. I'm going to click yes, I'm going to approve this. And off I go, approve the PO and send it to the VP. Now that it's gone to the VP, I now basically need to do the same thing for the VP. And now let me see if I can pop my phone up here. Yeah. So, okay. So now you can see, can you see it? It's visible. So you can see my phone in here, the same emails in here. I'm going to click on my task list here. Let's see, VP. Okay. And I'm going to log in as the VP here. And you can see here how the task list is now rendering on a mobile device. Again, I can look at the audit trail. And actually, before I perform this on the phone, let me quickly go back to my, I'm going back to the original browser. I'm going back as the person who started the workflow. This is another new feature in Frevo, Frevo 8 here. You can see this is the most recent workflow that we submitted. So one of the things that we have in this version here is the audit trail. This is only appearing down below as I resize the browser. Sorry about that. But I want to quickly take a look at this view feature in here. So this is something that's been requested by a number of customers. You know, I started the workflow as Ashish. It's gone off. It's 3 steps down the road to sitting in the VP's inbox, but I don't remember what I submitted. So now from that audit trail, you can click a button and you can see exactly what was submitted when you what you put in here when you submitted that particular PO. Nice feature that a lot of people love. Going back to my mobile device, I'm going to simply click on the button and perform it. Again, you can see it's very similar. I can see everything. Everything automatically resizes. I can see what is being requested here. I'm going to click yes to approve it. click sign. You'll see the signature appear, and click approve and finish PO, and the purchase order was completed just like before. So if I went back in here and refreshed my tasks page again, I should at this point see that this particular PO has now been completed, and you can see the entire audit trail down here as well. Okay, so that was a quick look at a purchase order. The last thing, I guess, for completeness sake, is that you'll see that you did get an email saying that your PO has been approved and processed. And again, there's the PO attached to the email as well. Okay, so that was we're almost out of time here. We got a few more minutes for some questions here. So it's a quick look at a number of things that we went through here. We showed how you can log in using SAML. We took a look at some dynamic behavior to create business rules, integration with a backend system. We installed a purchase order template, and we're able to configure that template and set up routing to a specific manager as well as a VP, including conditional routing. We have a number of resources as well. Really just point you to our website here. Under Solutions, Accounting and Finance, there's a video, there are some benefits, and there are a number of examples as well. There's also a purchase order page. If you go to our customers page, you'll see a number of case studies, including a lot of people who have used Frevo in a variety of areas, including purchase orders. And then under Get Help videos in here, there are a number of short demo videos as well. So hopefully you'll find some of those things useful. Thanks for watching. I guess we have a few more minutes. Hopefully we have a couple of questions that I can answer.
Well, one of the questions was about kind of going back to that flow designer. You had mentioned that you could send it to an email. So what is the difference between sending to an email versus sending to a user?
Right. So the question is, you had mentioned in the flow designer that you can send it to an email address. So what's the difference between sending to a user versus sending to an email? That's a great question, and that's an important feature in Frevo as well. So let's take a quick look at that. So let's say after the VP has approved, I want to route it outside the company to the client for the client's signature. So I made a copy of that form. In this case, let's rename it to client here. And now in this assignment field here, I don't want to assign it to a particular user or to a role. And essentially, I don't want to assign it to somebody who's within my organization who logs in to the system. I want to assign it to a random, to a anonymous user using just their email address. So specifically in the case of a PO, you don't want to be routing POs to your clients and then saying, oh, you need to log in or you need to create an account. You just route to an email address, they click a link in the email, they sign, and they're done. So all you do here is you type an email address. There'll be validation for this for the email address. So I can just type an email address here, and I'm going to click submit, and that's it. So what happens here is that the workflow, once the VP approves, it'll now route to the email address. The person will get an email with a link, and when you click on that link, the form will simply display without the need for any authentication. Okay? Hopefully that answered the question.
Yeah.
Okay.
I just lost some of my audio, so that's so in addition to the resources that you have, that you showed, what are the other options for training? Can you show folks about that training?
Can you still see my screen? It says the connection with GoToMeeting server has been lost.
Yeah, I saw the same thing, and I thought maybe it was just on my computer. Like,
can you still see my screen?
It's frozen. I didn't see anything you did once you got that with this.
Oh God. Stinks. Well, hopefully people can still hear us. I think it says connecting to audio. Come on. This is like the...
Just want to do... chat.
Right, try it again.
Just wanted to put something like thank you for coming to the webinar. Please email with any questions.
Yeah, I guess if you can hear us, thank you very much for attending the webinar. Sorry about whatever problem we appear to be having with the webinar software. If you have any further questions, if you can still hear us, and if you have any more questions, please email them to info@frevo.com, and we will certainly answer your questions. Thanks for attending.